Have you ever heard of permission revocation? It's this subtle but honestly really powerful way of controlling someone. And it doesn't work by force. It works with a simple kind of insidious trick. It reframes your freedom as if it's some kind of favor. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and see exactly how it's done.
You know, the most striking truth about permission revocation is that it doesn't look like a theft. It looks like a policy change. We kind of assume that if someone wants to control us, they have to physically take something away, right? But in these high-pressure situations, the most effective strategy is to make you believe your basic rights were actually just gifts they gave you all along.
So let me ask you something. Do you ever find yourself asking for permission to do things you used to do without even thinking about it? That right there, that is the core paradox of permission revocation. It's that moment someone starts allowing you to have a life just so they have the power to take it away whenever you don't comply. In this explainer, we're going to dig into how our own brains can get nudged into seeing our own freedom as some kind of conditional reward.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start with that core conflict. Then we'll learn the vocabulary of this whole dynamic. After that, we'll walk through the three-step mechanism, get into the psychology that makes it so darn effective, and finally, we'll look at some tools for recognizing it, and most importantly, reclaiming your own agency.
So let's kick things off with that fundamental shift. It's all about this subtle move from your natural state of freedom, what we call inherent agency, to a system where your life suddenly requires somebody else's approval, conditional access. And here's the crucial thing to get. This isn't about someone yelling or being overtly aggressive. No, it's way more subtle. It's about systematically recalibrating your boundaries to fit someone else's agenda. The goal is to reframe your reality so you actually feel grateful for a freedom you never even lost in the first place. It's like going from being a fully autonomous adult to feeling like a teenager who has to keep their grades up just to avoid being grounded. All right, so to really get how this works, we've got to learn the language. This next part is all about the key terms that make up the foundation of this entire system. Think of it as the vocabulary of control. So the main engine driving this is something called contextual relabeling. This is basically a process where your own life, your decisions, your time, your friendships, gets completely rebranded. What was once just a basic right is now presented as a conditional privilege, something that can be granted or, and this is the key, taken away. And what this relabeling does is create what's known as the ownership illusion. It's this really deep, profound shift in your thinking where you start to believe, whether you realize it or not, that another person has a legitimate right to permit or deny your normal, everyday activities. The ownership of your own life kind of gets transferred. And once that illusion is locked in, that's when autonomy monetization kicks in. This is where every standard thing you do, stuff you wouldn't think twice about, suddenly becomes a kind of currency. Seeing your family, spending your own money, even just having a quiet night to yourself, all of these become bargaining chips that you now have to earn through compliance. Okay, let's just look at this side by side, because it makes it super clear. On the left, you've got an inherent right. That's a baseline freedom. You own it. It doesn't need anyone's permission. Deciding what you're going to do tonight, that's an inherent right. But on the right, you have a conditional privilege. This is framed as a reward, something that can be yanked away at any moment. It's all based on you staying in someone's good graces. Being allowed to see your friends is the absolute classic example. The whole system works by sneakily turning everything on the left into something that looks like it belongs on the right. When these dynamics go on for a while, people often report something called the environmental shrinking effect. And it's as sad as it sounds. It's this really concerning outcome where a person's world just gets smaller and smaller, but they don't even notice it's happening. And why? Because all of their focus has shifted to just protecting the few privileges they think they have left. At that point, the person effectively becomes their own jailer, carefully managing their own life to avoid rocking the boat. So we've got the lingo down. Now let's look at how this thing is actually built. There's a really clear three-step pattern for how the system gets put into place and how it completely reroutes a person's thinking. It all starts with something really subtle called the false gift. Now, this is a critical first step. It happens when a controller approves of something you are going to do anyway. Like you say, "Hey, I'm going to go see my sister this weekend." And they reply, "Okay, that's fine." See that? That simple response implies they had the power to say it wasn't fine. It just created a hierarchy that wasn't there a second ago. And next up is the conditional tether. This is where those false gifts, which have now been reframed as privileges, get explicitly tied to your cooperation. You start hearing things like, "Sure, you can go out with your friends as long as you finish that thing for me first," or "Yeah, we can visit your family if you're in a better mood." The privilege is now clearly directly attached to your compliance. And this is where the trap just snaps shut, the austerity phase. Because our brains are hardwired to hate losing things, the simple threat of having a privilege taken away creates a ton of stress. So, to avoid the pain of hearing no or having something taken away, you just start limiting yourself. You stop asking to go out. You stop bringing up certain friends. You basically restrict your own life to keep the peace. So when you put it all together, you can see the whole cycle. The false gift makes you feel obligated for your own independence. Then the conditional tether connects that feeling to your behavior. And finally, the austerity phase uses your own fear of loss to make you manage yourself. It's a slow burn, which is exactly why it's so hard to pinpoint the exact moment you lost your freedom. So why on earth does this work so well? I mean, it's not just about dealing with a controlling person. It's about how this system exploits some really basic psychological principles we all have. Let's get into the motivations and vulnerabilities at play here. From the controller's side, the big motivation is often something called zero-cost leverage. And think about it, it's kind of brilliant in a really dark way. If you can convince someone that their own life is basically a subscription service that you provide, you get a massive amount of power and influence without having to provide anything of real value. You're literally creating power out of thin air. Now, on the other side, the main vulnerability is a core feature of human psychology called loss aversion. I mean, studies have shown over and over that our brains are just wired to feel the pain of losing something about twice as strongly as the pleasure of gaining that same thing. And permission revocation totally weaponizes this. The fear of losing a privilege you thought you had is a way more powerful motivator than the idea of gaining a new one. So you end up with this psychological mismatch, right? The controller's goal is zero-cost leverage, getting power by creating scarcity where there is none. But the target's vulnerability is often a deep need for social harmony. So many of us are taught to value not being a problem way more than we value being free. And when those two things collide, you get this incredibly powerful dynamic that is almost impossible to see when you're in the middle of it. And that's really the core question, isn't it? This is the fundamental internal shift that happens. It's quiet, it's subtle, but it's huge. Your focus moves from what you want to what's allowed. Your own needs just take a back seat to getting approval, and more importantly, avoiding disapproval. It's a really critical question to ask yourself. Okay, so how do you even start to see this pattern in your own life? Well, the first and most important step is just awareness. This section isn't about confrontation, not at all. It's about giving you the tools to just recognize and label what's happening for yourself. Think of this as the ownership audit, a little internal checklist you can run through. Start asking yourself these questions. Is this an inherent right, or is it a social favor? Is what we're doing a mutual agreement, or is it a tool for control? Is the whole concept of permission here being used as leverage? And finally, this one is key. Is the guilt I feel for just doing my own thing a real emotion, or is it a learned symptom of the system? Once you start recognizing that ownership illusion, you can move to the next step, agency preservation awareness. This is an active, mindful thing you do. It's about observing that conditional language when it pops up, that if you do this, then you can do that phrasing, without immediately feeling that pressure to earn the permission. The goal is just to notice the pattern. That simple act of recognition is what breaks the cycle before you start limiting yourself. And that brings us to our final and honestly most important section, reclaiming your territory. Once you've diagnosed the pattern, the focus has to shift back to the core truth of your own autonomy. This is such a powerful way to reframe it. The language of asking for permission makes total sense for a child and a parent, but in a relationship between two adults, two equals, it's almost always a red flag. It's a sign of an imbalance, a sign of overreach. It's not a sign of respect. It's a sign of a completely manufactured hierarchy. Let's be absolutely crystal clear about this. Your inherent rights to your own thoughts, your own time, your relationships, your autonomy, they are not a subscription service. They don't expire. They are not based on good behavior. They are never up for renewal. And this, right here, is the ultimate takeaway from all of this. The entire system of permission revocation is built on a complete illusion. The idea that someone else can give you something you already possess. The moment you truly, deeply understand that your agency is yours by default, the entire architecture of control just starts to fall apart. Because you cannot be given what you already own.